So for this muesli bar, you need 180 grams of dates, finely chopped. These ones are dehydrated, so once we've chopped them, we'll rehydrate them. Now, depending on how dry your dates are, will depend on how much water that you need. I've put in just enough to cover them, to rehydrate them. And you don't have to drain that off unless you've really put too much, but you can see how much I've put there. Now that will just let them soak nicely while you prepare the next bunch of ingredients. So the next thing I'm adding is 1.5 cups of rolled oats. I'll just measure those out, put them in. You don't have to be too exact with this recipe. That's 1 cup. 1.5. Alrighty. So I'm going to give that a stir to incorporate all that in. Now with the little bit of liquid that's still in there from the dates, it should mix in easily. So you really are better to make sure that you chop those dates into nice small pieces, because then they'll be throughout the muesli bar, which gives it a little bit of a chew and some sweetness too. So I'm just going to put in some slivered almonds. I've got about 130 grams there. I'm just going to mix that in too. Noisy car outside, I'm not sure if you can hear that. Okay, I'm just going to get a spatula and get everything on the side of the bowl, just to make sure I'm getting it all in there. Okay, that looks pretty well mixed. The next thing that you'll want to add is your maple syrup and peanut butter. Now you can use any nut butter that you like. I use PB organic peanut powder. So I'm just going to go and measure that out. Now I've used 45 mils of maple syrup, and I've used 25 grams of the peanut powder. You can see there it's a little bit dry because I have also added a little organic cacao powder, because I like a chocolatey taste. So if your mix does go dry like mine did, you can just add a splash of water and just mix that up well. Make sure there's none of that powder left, and you can put that into your mix. Ooh, that looks yummy. Once you've got all of that out of your bowl, you can then start to mix that in. And this is where you have to mix really well. If it's a little bit sticky, you want that chocolate, maple syrup, peanut butter. If you don't want to use the powdered peanut butter, you don't have to. What I would do is I would put your maple syrup into a saucepan on a really low heat and add the peanut butter, and you have to continually stir, so it takes a little while. You don't want to burn the maple syrup, but until the peanut butter has really dissolved into the maple syrup, you might use 25 grams of peanut butter, and you can use anything from 40 mils up to 80 mils of maple syrup. Depends on how much of a sweet tooth you've got. So I'm just going to continue making sure what's in. I might just use my spatula. clean that off in the sink, and just continue to make sure that's all really well mixed. Now look, sometimes once this is pressed into a dish, I even find that it's a little bit too crumbly. And I just know it all depends on how dry your dates are. If you don't wet them enough, then even though it all comes together well and you press it down into a dish, then it still may not stick together and might be crumbly. Now, if that ever does happen and you've got the patience, I would pull it out of the dish you're pressing it into and put it back into a bowl and splash some water in it, just a little, and remix it to press it. And I think this looks okay. So now what I really like about my muesli bar is that it has a good crunch. But with the almonds that are in there, they are not so crunchy anymore. They're just raw, slivered raw almonds. If you use activated, that gives a nice crunch. But what I do once I've done this is I add, for added protein and fibre, I add in activated buckwheat. So I'm just going to get that. Now I add in about 80 grams. Put in some, mix it around. I don't want to mix it too much at this point. I just want them to be mixed in quite evenly around the mix. There we go. That's my 80 grams activated buckwheat. They do have a nice crunch and not much flavour, so you can do anything you like with them. Like I said before, I add some cacao because I like a nice chocolatey muesli bar, and so does my husband. So bring that all together, hoping this isn't going to be too crumbly. Test it, sticks together, which is really what we want. Bit of a try. All right. Now the next step is to get the dish that you're going to put your muesli bar into. I use an old Pyrex dish, and we're just going to put the mix in there. Quite easy to come out of this bowl. No licking this bowl. Nothing left in it to lick. And just get this into your dish. Now, the trick is to get it as even as you can. And what I do is get some baking paper and put it on top. Makes it easier to spread out, to get it pretty even. I think I've got it pretty even. Get anything that you've got that you can really press down to compress it. another look at the edges, make sure they're pressed down. That looks pretty good. I'll just press it down again. The next step that I do is I put it in the freezer just for about 10 minutes to get it really set. And once I bring it out, let me just find, I actually use a pizza cutter and then I go through it. So I'm going to pop that in the freezer for a few minutes. Okay, so I had a bit of a clear up, pulled my muesli bar out of the freezer just to kind of set it. It doesn't have to go in the freezer, but I find the firmer that it is, the easier it is to cut. Now you can slice this in any way you like, but I tend to go straight down the middle, and then I make smaller slices. So I'm just going to do that now. They're not necessarily even. You might be a lot more exacting than I am. Whoops. Not very neat, am I? Doesn't matter too much what it looks like. So I've got there 18 pieces. Oof, is that right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 pieces. And to be honest, I even like a smaller amount, but that's just me. And I will just do that. I will then put it in the freezer again just to firm that up, and I'll be back in a minute to show you what a piece looks like. Okay, so I did make a start on pulling a piece out, and it has come out quite well. And that is just one small piece. It's enjoyable, so I have 2 pieces if you like. Now my batch today made 36 pieces. Each of these has a couple of grams of protein and about 69, 70 calories. So you have to, if you're tracking, that's a nice small treat. And it has, yep, some protein, some good fats, and it has some good carbs in it too, good for energy. So let me know if you have a go at making this. Enjoy.